helping to keep your world beautiful. I'm an employment law solicitor. Now, employment law is what's called an unregulated part of the legal industry. In other words, any Tom, Dick, and Harry can start practicing employment law, whether they have a legal background or not. They can call themselves a lawyer because that is not a term with any legal meaning in this country. And the problem with that is if you go to somebody who is not a solicitor, you'll only probably know the difference when they get it wrong and things go wrong. Because if that's the case with me, I have professional indemnity insurance, and I am regulated by the Solicitors Regulation Authority, which means that they can feel my neck and can take action against me if I do anything wrong or unethical. Now, there's no guarantee you'll have those protections if you go anywhere else. And obviously, I'm a solicitor, so I have 6 years of legal training behind me. So that's one reason why, if you have employment law needs, you should always go to a solicitor regulated by the Solicitors Regulation Authority. I'm very proud to call myself a solicitor and have done since 1992. Now, I specialize in employment law, and my industry, just like any others, has been hit and has probably been affected more than any other by COVID-19. And over the spring and summer, I've been getting to grips with all the Chancellor has said regarding furlough and the effects that that has had on employment law and will have a continuing effect for many years to come. So I am looking today for two types of client. Firstly, unfortunately, due to COVID-19 and the effect on the economy, many firms are going to be getting rid of employees. They're going to be slimming down, and they are going to be thinking in terms of redundancies. Now, you can't be a Donald Trump and say, or you're fired, or Alan Sugar saying you're fired. Because if you do that, you're going to end up in front of an employment tribunal. Employers have to go through a rigorous process before they make a selection for redundancy, involving how do you assess whether somebody should be in the pool for those being made redundant? What kind of consultations do you have? What criteria do you use to judge those who should be made redundant? And are you going to exercise those criteria in a fair way? Are you going to give those employees the chance to comment, the chance to give alternatives to try and change your mind, although it may not necessarily do so? So it's very important that all firms go through that process. And the bigger the firm, the more people that are being laid off, the more that what they have to do is prescripted, in the sense that they've got to spend a certain amount of time on consultations, and they've got to consult with unions or trade union reps if they're getting rid of more than 20 people from a particular site where work is carried out. So I'm looking for employers who are making that difficult decision to make staff redundant at this terrible time in our history. But I don't just represent employers. I also represent employees, and they need assistance just as much as employers do. So how can I help? How can I help them make a difference? Well, if employees are selected for redundancy, then or are being considered for redundancy, I can help them to take part in the redundancy consultations. I can tell them how to object to their selection for being in a pool for redundancy. I can show them what to do when they're sitting with their boss one-to-one, and what proposals they can make for alternatives to them being made redundant. If worse comes to the worst and they are selected for redundancy, I can help them appeal. There's no right in law to appeal, but normally a good employer will have an appeal process. If they don't, I'll help them to put in a grievance. They can appeal by the back door. And if they are selected for redundancy, they may well get something called a settlement agreement, which the employer will require them to sign before they sign off on their redundancy. And it may mean that they get extra money or they get a better reference than they otherwise would. And I can help them go through that settlement agreement. I can explain it to them. And best of all, I'll be paid by their employer to give them that advice. So those are the two sides of the coin that I'm looking for. Employers selecting those for redundancy, and employees who are at risk of redundancy. Now, earlier I explained that I have a background as well in criminal defense law. This gives me a unique perspective when it comes to dealing with transport companies, coach companies, bus companies, because what I can do is I can advise employers on how to treat their staff and how to deal with their staff. But I can also help their employees remain on the road by dealing with road traffic matters they have, because they're dealt with at the magistrates court and they are classified as criminal matters. So I have a lot of experience since 1992 of going to magistrates courts and arguing for people charged with road traffic offences. Anything from dangerous driving to speeding or driving with no insurance. I can help people. I can help them keep their licenses if they're at risk of losing their licenses. I can argue exceptional hardship for their loved ones, which is sometimes a very good way of them keeping their licenses. I dealt with a 70-year-old retired doctor who looks after his wife, and he'd forgotten to renew his insurance. Was caught driving. I managed to keep his license because he was the one who took his wife to the doctors and looked after her and was the sole carer for her. So he was very grateful to me, and that's the kind of difference that I can make. So I would like you, I'm just going to look up something. I want to give you some names of some people I'd like you to look for me for. So anyway, technological glitch at this end, but anyway, if you can look for taxi companies who can use my assistance for both for their own businesses and for their employees, I'd be very grateful indeed. So that's Sandeep Bhatia, Beaumont's Law Practice, helping to keep your world beautiful. I don't know if we've got time for any questions. If anybody...
10 seconds.
Okay. No?
That's
anyway, thank you very much indeed for listening, everybody.